Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this day of value added course. I myself, Khwaja Danish Hamid, a student of Jamia Millia Islamia, who did his PhD in Pashtun movement in Pakistan, transformation, origins, development, 1957 to 1986, and have published many research paper as well as the publication are international as well as national in nature, and have extensively worked on this in this area. Uh, will uh, uh, will open the session with the permission of the chair, and the topic of the presentation will be the administration in the later Vedic period. So, administration is a very important part of, I will say, administration is a very important part of this age, that is later Vedic age, as it was militarized, organized to launch raids on the opposing tribes, so that they were so that they were supposed to be a martial race, as portrayed by many European historians and excavators. The administration is portrayed as patriarchal or dominated by males due to the absence of women. Birth of a girl child was considered as omen in this age, indicating the declining status of female. And the question that arises to our mind, that I will be taking care of in this topic, will be: what is administration? What were the origins of administration? What is Vedic age? What is later Vedic period? What is later Vedic administration? So, starting with the first question: what is administration? Administration is a process that seeks, through the planning, organizing, execution, and control of resources, to give them more efficient use to achieve the objectives of an institution. In reality, in order for the administration to achieve its objective, it has to make use of human, intellectual, material, technological, financial, and other resources that are possessed in the coordinated way. The seeking ability maintained and the growth of the social groups or institution are responsible for this factor. The key person in the administration is known as the administrator. So, in this sense, the task of administration supposed to have achieved the during objective during work hours in subordination of someone else, for which a hierarchical relationship is needed, where one works under command of another. Means subordination is the DNA of administration. Administration can be applied in formal or formal institutions. Formal institutions are those that are governed by rules and laws that are written so that they can function, as the case or the state of the company or any empire or any country is. Likewise, informal institutions have rules that they are not written, as in case of family, where administration can be applied because resources must excuse me, must still be administered to meet its objective. What are the origins of administration? This is another question which arises to our mind. How administration originated? In the ancient age, some development in administration issues can be found in Egypt, Greece, Rome, China, Babylon, and Sumeria. Later, in the Middle Ages, there are some contribution related to decentralized administration of feudalism. While in the modern age, the Industrial Revolution took place, which played an important role in the improvement of production methods. In summary, I will say that it can be said that origin and history of administration dates back to the beginning of humanity. This, when the people had to organize themselves for the basic tasks such as gathering of food or building their homes. So now, naturally, another question arises, that what was Vedic period all about if we look at the topic. So Vedic period was that during the period of 2000 to 1000 BCE, communities at different stages of cultural development were present in different regions of India. Their culture were essentially agro-pastoral, and our understanding of these culture is based entirely on archaeological remains because, with the exception of Harappan culture, none of the culture have left behind any written records. In this unit, that is which I am taking care of, the we shall be focusing on the evidence provided by voluminous body of religious texts, including the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sam Veda, and Athar Veda, which are considered to be the earliest records of India. We shall also try to supplement the evidence with whatever relevant archaeological evidence are available. The Rig Veda is considered to be the earliest of the collection of hymns available, and so we shall start by examining Rig Veda for an understanding of earlier Vedic period, and then go on to the Vedas. That is the later Vedas. That is some Samved, Yajurved, and Atharved. And allied text will be also taken care of. Uh, uh, they are first the Vedas are thought to have been composed by the Aryans, and it was long believed that Aryans played a major role in civilizing the Indian subcontinent. Let me tell you, this civilization factor has an important role. This word civilization has an important role during the colonial days and even today as well, because every nation or every ethnic group tries to associate itself with the most civilized lot, and the definition of the civilized lot flows from the textbooks or the books written by the European historians, where they keep the ethnic approach in mind, ethnocentric approach in mind, and keeps their widespread burden agenda on top, thereby claiming that they are the most civilized lot, and it is must and it is necessary that they should go abroad, means overseas, and civilize those people who are considered to be the lesser lot or the otherized lot as well in their history. So the contents of Rig Veda, if analyzed carefully, do not give the Vedic period and cultures in transition impression of a advanced material culture. On the other hand, many of the material traits, which are the characteristic of Indian civilization, are already present in non-Vedic archaeological cultures in different part of India. When the content of Rig Veda compared with the content of the later Vedas and the allied texts, it becomes significant that changes took place in the Vedic society itself. So, if we are to compare and contrast, we can easily get to know what are the changes. But there are certain school of thought of historian who believes in continuity, that there was nothing like change. Continuity happens, and continuity is open for accommodation of all kinds of alterations that are made with the time. So this means that there was no fixed cultural pattern which can be called Vedic culture or Aryan culture. The core geographic area to which the evidence of the Rig Veda relates to was Sapt Sindhava, or the land of seven rivers. This could correspond with the whole of Punjab and its neighboring regions of Haryana. But Rig Vedic geography also includes Gomal Pass, southern Afghanistan, southern Jammu and Kashmir. Earlier interpretation regarding early Vedic society are based on theory of Indo-Aryan migration from West Asia into the Indian subcontinent. These migrations, who are regarded as authors of the Vedas, migrants who are regarded as the authors of Vedas, are called Vedic people. According to historical interpretation, the Aryans came came to India in several stages of waves, very much similar to the Mongol invasion which happened during the medieval era, which almost destroyed and ravaged the Islamic hinterland. So there were many waves in which the Aryans were coming. Let me tell you, these Vedas were can also be treated as the memoirs, or you can say the uh, travelogues of the Aryans. Travelogue means those books which are composed while you are traveling, whatever the difficulties you encounter while settling in a particular area or while traveling as well. The Aryans are considered to be the representative of a linguistic group seeking Indo European languages. These are distinguished by traditional historians and archaeologists from non Aryan Harappans of preceding period. However, in making certain observation on early Vedic society, it may be fruitful to see if literary texts and archaeological evidences can supplement each other. So, if both types of sources are from the same region and of the same period, then they together can give us a more detailed idea about economic, social, political, and religious life of the Arameans. When we are talking about economic, social, and political life, it also includes administrative life as well, or the administrative system. So now the next question that arises to our mind, the real question is, what was later Vedic period? Later Vedic period is the period followed by the Rig Vedic age, where the social system was strict. The Varna system gained rapid popularity in this period. The birth of the girl was seen as a terrible omen, and the women were not allowed to study or attend school. In addition, women were not allowed to speak in public during the later Vedic period. The people were divided into various castes such as Brahmins, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, and Shudras. Another interesting fact about the later Vedic age is the king didn't have a standing army. For wars, the tribal unit was activated. The reason for not having the standing army can be very obvious, that they didn't had wealth or resources to sustain the standing army. And if you see and compare it from the medieval times when we have standing army, it is seen that these standing army, if it doesn't have resources to pay them, they used to rebel, or you can say they acted as a destabilizing agent in the state system. And these rebellions used to result in death or execution of many sultans or the rurals of the time. The tribal system had rulers which were considered to be first among equals. And the tribal system had sort of a check and balance system in it. So, the later Vedic period, the Aryans moved from the east. The Aryans expanded to the eastern Gangetic plains, which is known as Brahmana. During the later Vedic period, one of the most important development was the growth of large kingdom. Panchalas had a famous name called Javali, and he was the patron of learning. Kosalas, Kashi, Vadeha came into prominence when the Kurus and Panchalas fell. The later Vedic period in civilization includes the three divisions of India: Aryavarta, Dakshin Pantha, and Madhya Desa. These are the categories which were defining the geographic category at that time. And I also believe that in this era, as happened in the prehistoric past, where the land was divided into Pangaea and Panthalsa, the historians must have divided for the purpose of studying the if we were to suppose to inquire the common Aryan regarding the Aryavarta or Dakshin Pantha or Madhya Desa, he might not be aware of excuse me, he might not be aware of these categories. So these categories were very fluid and geographic in nature. Sometimes there can be hostilities between these kind of Aryavarta or Dakshin Pantha and Madhya Desa, but mostly the Aryavarta were the people who were supposed to fight wars. So during the later Vedic, many big kingdoms arose and tribe merged to form Rashtra. The small kingdom merged to form Mahajanpad. With this, the scale of wars also increased rapidly. And just to add to it, see, viewers, war is a learning experience. When we fight wars, we learn about each other. Either you learn it through dialogue or either you learn it by fighting. But we learn. So this idea must have flown from certain boundaries that are much beyond our work. But the conformity of these sources is still unknown. And this is my opinion, which might be wrong as well, and open to all kinds of criticism, comments, and suggestions. So, with the the scale of war expanding, we see the expansion of kingdom. The royal power grew in tandem to encourage their status. The king undertook sacrifices and ceremonies. Some of the ceremonies were Rajasuya, Ashwamedha, and Vajpaya. During the later Vedic period, the king was equated with God, and the term divine kinship was introduced. The Vaishyas were forced to pay taxes to the king. The Vaishya's children become Vaish, and the Shudras become and the Shudra children become Vash automatically. The Varna system was divided into two classes: the ruling class and the class responsible for paying taxes and the manual labor. Such type of system is also seen in many of the Abrahamic faith. Let's not to forget to mention Zionism, wherein their book of laws, that is Talmud, it is mentioned that the world is divided into two kind of people: Jews and the Gentile. Jews, who are the rulers and who are meant to rule, and Gentile, who are the people who are subordinate to them and are supposed to pay taxes and work on their land. So the ownership of property was, or ownership of resources were in the hand of Jews. So very kind of similar kind of congruence I can see between this later Vedic age and the Zionist period. So the Varna system was divided into ruling and the ruled class, the class who is paying the taxes. Iron was widely used in the later Vedic age. Knowledge of manure during this period added significant benefit in agriculture during this period. With the growth of agriculture production, trade also progressed in the later Vedic period. Industrial work became widened, and with it, metal work, woodwork, leather work also advanced. Coins like Nishka and Krashpana were used in India as a result of increased trade. Increased trade means there were breakthroughs in this age in the transportation system, either through rivers or through seas or through land. Bullock carts must have been extensively used in this age for transporting goods. Hence, we see elaborate structures in this age, and so must have been the seal system in this age. However, there are their use was limited to small transaction. Apart from these, gold and silver coins were also used. Brahmins and Kshatriyas got benefited, but the Vaishyas and Shudras didn't receive any benefit out of it. During this period, Brahmins were superior to Kshatriyas. However, Kshatriyas often claimed superiority over the Brahmins during the later Vedic period. Caste based employment emerged. There were no opportunities for the women. The women's rights to attend assemblies was revoked, and child marriage grew rapidly. In the family, the authority was given to the father, and women were considered in the lower rank, indicating the patriarchal nature of the society. So, now coming to the next question, that is, what was later Vedic administration? Responsibility of the Rajan was to protect the tribe. He was aided by functionaries including Purohita, chaplain, the Senani, army chief, Dutas, that was the invoice, Pash, that was the spies. However, the autonomy of the Rajan was restricted to tribal council called as Sabha and Samiti. Author Lewin Basham, a noted historian and Indologist, theorizes the Sabha was a meeting of a great men in the tribe, whereas Samiti was meeting of free tribesmen. The two bodies were in part responsible for governance of the tribe. The Rajan could not accede to the throne without their approval. In the later Vedic period, the tribes had consolidated into small kingdoms, which had a capital and rudimentary administrative system. The Rajan was seen as the custodian of social order and the protector of Rashtra, that is polity. Hereditary kingship started emerging. Rituals in this era exalted the status of the king over the people. He was occasionally referred as Samrat, that was the supreme leader. The Rajan increased political power enabled him to gain greater control over the productive resources. A voluntary gift offering, that is Bali, became a compulsory tribute. There was no organized system of taxation. Sabha and Samiti were still, but with the increasing power of Rajan, their influence declined. Means centralization of authority was at its peak during its age. And not for this age, this is for every age. We see that the state has a tendency to centralize everything. Means if you are to look at the European state system during the Middle Ages, we find it has a centralizing tendency where the autonomy of an individual was at stake always. In fact, was under attack always. So the despotism was at its peak, and the king used to ignore or sometimes override the authority of the parliament. By the end of later Vedic age, different kind of political system such as monarchical states, Rajya, oligarchical states, Gana or Sangha, tribal principalities had started emerging. Economy in the Vedic period was sustained by a combination of pastoralist and agriculture way of life. Economic exchanges were conducted by gift giving, particularly to chief and priest, and barter system was there, wherein cattle was used as the unit of currency. The transition of Vedic society to semi-nomadic life to settle agriculture in the later Vedic age led to the increase in trade and competition of resources. Agriculture dominated the economic activities along the Ganges Valley through this period. Agriculture operation grew in complexity and the usage of iron implement increased. Apart from copper, bronze, and gold, later Vedic texts also mentioned about usage of the tin. Sorry for the interruption. Just a minute, wait for a while. So, my apologies for some technical glitches. I was not able to communicate certain things to you because I was offline because of technical reasons. And I will be just repeating what I have said. So, just for a minute, I will be giving a brief backdrop. So, let me start from the question: what was later Vedic period? So, in this later Vedic period, we are going to focus on what was Vedic administration. So, the Vedic period or the Vedic age, that is from 1500 BCE to 500 BC, gets its name from the Vedas. Early Vedic Aryans were organized into tribes rather than kingdoms. The chief of the tribe was called Rajan. The main responsibility of the Rajan was to protect the tribe. He was aided by several functionaries, including Purohita, that was chaplain, Senani, that was army chief, Dutas, that was envoys, and Spash, that was spies. However, the autonomy of the Rajan was restricted by the tribal councils called Sabha and Samiti. But A.L. Bassam, a noted historian and Indologist, theorized the Sabha was the meeting of great men in the tribe, whereas Samiti was a meeting of free tribesmen. The two bodies were in part responsible for governance of tribe. The Rajan could not accede to the throne without their approval. In the later Vedic period, the tribes had consolidated into small kingdoms, which had capital and rudimentary administrative system. The Rajan was seen as the custodian of social order and the protector of Rashtra. Hereditary kingship started emerging. Rituals in this era exalted the status of the king over the people. He was occasionally referred as Samrat, that was the supreme leader. The Rajan increased political power enabled him to gain greater control over the productive resources. The voluntarily gift offering, that is Bali, became a compulsory tribute. There was no organized system of taxation. Sabha and Samiti were still there, but with the increasing power of Rajan, their influence declined. So, this leads to a concept that despotism was at its peak during the later Vedic age, where the council, that was a sort of a certain level of democratic structure, was going down in this age. Its effectivity was going down, I will say. Very similar to European circumstances, where we see the rise of tyranny and the reign of terror, especially during the French Revolution, where dictatorships were common and the power were concentrated into the hands of few. A very similar concept, I would like to say that in my observation, I have seen that the state system has a very strange habit of centralizing everything. Means the tendency to centralize everything is present in the state, be it in any form of state. The centralization of the state attacks the autonomy of an individual. The autonomy of the individual, which includes in today's time the right to privacy, is also under attack if we were to look at the European state system. So, a very similar concept used to prevail in that later Vedic period, where the king had a sweeping powers over the Sabha or the Samiti. By the end of later Vedic age, different kind of political system such as monarchical states, that is Rajya, oligarchical state, that is Gana or Sangha, and tribal state, that state emerged. Economy in the Vedic period was sustained by a combination of pastoralist and agriculture way of life. Economic exchange were conducted by giving gifts, particularly to the chiefs and the priest, and the barter system was there. So the gift giving culture, or the it was supposed to be sort of a bribe giving culture, was have emerged during this age, which might have led to the prominence, or you can say the dawn of corruption. So the transition of Vedic society from semi-nomadic to settled agriculture in the later Vedic age led to the increase in trade and competence or competition for resources. Agriculture dominated the economic activities along the Ganges Valley during this period. Agriculture operations grew in complexity and the usage of iron implements increased. Apart from copper, bronze, gold, later Vedic texts also mentions about usage of tin, lead, and silver. Crops of wheat, rice, barley were cultivated. The crafts and occupations of such as carpentry, leatherwork, tanning, pottery, astrology, jewelry, dyeing, and winemaking arose. Eminent historians like Promila Thapar, who have extensively worked on this age, characterizes Vedic era state formation as being in a condition of arrest development because chiefs were relatively autonomous and owing to surplus wealth they controlled, which was used for the increasingly grandiose rituals that otherwise could have been directed towards state building. So the Upanishads, the period of Upanishad, the final phase of Vedic era was approximately contemporary with a new wave of state formation. Was linked to the beginning of urbanization in the Ganges Valley. The growth of population and trade networks led to social and economic changes that started putting pressure in older ways of life, suggesting the end of Vedic period. And by the time the urbanization process started, we see that Mauryan dynasty is coming to power, and the treatise of Kautilya, namely Arthashastra, becoming work of statecraft. Economic polity and military strategy was a main object of sustenance of statecraft and the state. Kautilya was a scholar of Takshila University and was the teacher and guardian of Emperor Chandragupta Maurya. Indian administration system was well developed, and the treatise of Kautilya gives us very first detailed account of the same. So I'm going a little bit further, but in order to understand the past, sometimes you have to go further and then you have to come back. So the Mauryan period was the era of major development in the Indian administration. If we were to compare the and contrast the later Vedic phase with the age of Mauryas, decentralization was prevalent as the village unit played a very important role in the basic grassroots administration. Empire was divided into provinces, provinces into districts, district into rural urban centers for efficient administration. Further, if we look that in the later Vedic period, Aryans went even further east. The Satpana Brahmana alludes the spread of Aryans to eastern Gangetic plains. Several tribal groupings and kingdoms are referenced in the Vedic period. The expansion of big kingdoms was significant development during the same period. In the beginning, the Kuru and Panchala kingdom prospered. Kuru's prominent rulers were Pra- Parashik, Parashiktak and Jamevya. Pravana and Javali was a very well linked Panchala's rulers. He was supporter of education. Following the collapse of Kurus and Panchalas, other kingdoms such as Kosala, Kasi, Vaidehi rose to prominence. Kashi is the most notable ruler, most notable ruler Ajat Janaka ruled Vedeha, which had its capital at Mithila. Yajanayaka, a scholar, ornament his court. The easternmost tribal kingdom appeared to be Magad, Anga, and Vanga. Later, scriptures also allude to India's three divisions: Aryavarth, that was northern India, Madhya Desh, that was middle India, and Dakshin Path, that was east India or southern India. During this time, two further collections were composed: the Yajurveda Samhita and the Atharva Veda Samhita. The hymns in the Yajurveda are composed and it writes the present society socio-political formation. The Atharva Veda contains charms and spells, meanings to stave against evil. The mirrored they mirrored the non-Aryan ideas and customs. So the Samhitas were followed by the Brahmanas, or the collection of the literature that discuss the social and religious components of rites or the rituals. So what we get from this is that Vedic age is the time followed by the Rig Vedic age. The social system increasingly strict throughout the later Vedic age. During this period, the Varna system gains popularity, and the girl's birth was seen as terrible omen. During this period, women were not allowed to attend school, child marriages were common, women were not permitted to speak in public, and were seen as the second class citizens in our culture. People were classified as Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and vocations were passed down their generations. Kings did not have a standing army even in the Vedic times. Tribal units were activated during the times of conflicts to win battles. The monarchs had to eat from the same dish and his subject. In the later period, the Aryans migrated eastwards, settling in western east and eastern Uttar Pradesh, that is Kosala and Bihar. Thus, they had better and strong control over vast and extensive areas. During their migration, they were exposed to various types of communities, tribes, and politics. So, what was the polity that prevailed in this area is also an area of interest for many, and also for UPSC, as UPSC asked many questions from the area of polity. So, the concept of territory and territorial administration appeared. Smaller kingdoms grew and combined and formed kingdoms like Mahajanpadas. The scale of war grew and they became more deadly. As a result, the king needs to became extremely important in the light of new situation. As the king was the commander in chief of his army, hence he needs to be at par always. So he was the hub of administration in this area. As a result, the kings becomes a focus of writing history, or it might be an observer's paradox if we are to look from the lenses of European historians. To keep the power in hand, the king or the ruling class and the priest, they devised a system of varna, which was based on birth. Thus, the children of the ruling class and the priestly class automatically becomes kings or priests respectively. Rituals and sacrifices such as Raj Surya, uh, or you can say a king making ceremony, Vajpaya, another king making ceremony in which chariot race was common, and Ashwamedha, that horse sacrifice, was performed to strengthen the king's position. The performing priests conferred divine status to the king. They gain financially from such sacrifices through massive donations. Thus, the kings were equated with gods. So, a very similar kind of situation prevailed in medieval Europe as the church was the center for legitimizing authority of the king, and the priest was the intermediary between the king and the god. And the priest paid, or you can say the clergy played an important role in portraying king as a representative of God on this earth. So the divine nature of kingship was prevalent in the medieval Europe as well. A very similar kind of situation which is prevailing in the later Vedic period. The Pope, or you can say the pastor in the European ages, was had the power to forgive any kind of sin. If we were to pay him a sum of money, he used to issue a pardon certificate. A very similar situation during the later Vedic age was also prevalent. As a result, the notion of divine kingship was born of course, in the later Vedic age. Coming back to the topic, the king and his lineage rose to prominence in the Vedic culture. The Vaishyas were compelled to remain Vaishyas and pay taxes to the king. Vaishya children automatically became Vaishya and were forced to pay taxes. Children of Shudras and on the other hand, were born as Shudras. Thus, the Varna system concentrated power in two classes, ruling and the priestly, and ensured a steady supply of tax revenue from Vaishyas and the manual labors, that is from the Shudras. So, looking at the administration in depth of the later Vedic period, which is very important from the point of view of Union Public Service Commission, the UPSC. The structure of Sabha and Samiti was changed and their importance declined during the later Vedic period. They were dominated by chiefs and rich nobles. Women were no longer permitted there. The early ministers remained there, but some new ministers got included. They include Mahishi, main queen of the king, Purohit, that is the priest, that is a Senani, commander, Sangrahati, treasurer, Bhagdut or tax collector, Gramini village headsman, and Suta chariot driver. So it was a sort of cabinet ministry of this age. Divine kingship, another interesting factor. Kings became responsible solely to God, and their accountability to the government, to the common masses, were zero during this age. Hence, it creates a revolutionary circumstances of uprising against the king, and they were only answerable to gods. They this makes them as they were only answerable to God. This makes them despots. Why they were made as despots? Because they have forever undid their accountability. The recommendations were not obligatory to obey. The king need not listen to the minister's advice or ministry's advice. As a result, the previous regulation of mantris was lost. Additionally, the gift that a civilian would offer voluntarily ceased and became a tax. So gifts were occasional in nature, tax has permanency in nature. This was the major differences. Now coming up to the military system in depth, this is also a part of administration. Owing to the frequency of battles, a king was forced to systemize the military system. As a result, during the time period, a proper military structure emerged. Looking at the militarized economy of this age, agriculture was the chief occupation. Industrial work like metal work, pottery, carpentry was also being done in this age. The economic condition started booming because of foreign trades with regions like Babylonia and Sumeria. Vedic Aryans became a product, a significant significant contribution to the industrial or you can say paved the way for the growth of crafts and trade. The trade progressed as agriculture production increased, and so was the population. The Vedic Aryans now ruled over a much larger area than before. As a result, markets were also widened. The rise of trade compelled merchants to brand together. As a result, proto guilds or early trading organizations arose during this period. Early coins such as Nishanka and Krishpana were introduced in India in response to the increased trade, but their use was restricted to smaller transactions. Bullock carts and waterways were used at transport. Now, I will be just jotting down, or you can say my conclusion, by saying that during the end of later Vedic period, a significant backlash arose against priestly dominance, cults, and rituals, particularly the Panchalas and Vedis, who were supporters of education and enlightenment in that era, where the Upanishads were produced during 600 BC. So we also observe that the rulers who were supporters of educating their subjects were overthrown by their own subject for being supporter of education. A very paradoxical situation, and of obviously might be ringing bells in some people's mind. So these philosophical works criticize the rites, rituals, as well as emphasize the importance of correct belief and understanding. The revolution against sacrifices, the Varna system, and the other rites led to the establishment of Buddhism and Jainism. So, viewers, with this, I come to an end to my presentation. I hope you must have acquired a lot from my presentation and it must have benefited you in many ways in cracking UPSC, that is Union Public Service Commission, and other exam as well. So my best wishes to you. And with this, with the permission of the chair, I throw open the floor for question and criticism, comments, and suggestion as well. Thank you. Thank you. Please write your questions on the comment box. I will read it out and I will answer your questions. Thank you. Any questions, anyone? I'm waiting for questions. Please ask. Feel free to ask questions. So I believe there are no questions right now. So I will just sum up my points, what we gained today from today's presentation. The first and most foremost thing that we gained from the presentation today, that was administration in the Vedic age, the later Vedic period, is that the status of women was declining during this phase, and it tremendously declined. It made them completely absent from the public spaces, also from the decision making, and also to the certain extent from the sabhas and samitis as well. They were not allowed to speak publicly, and they were completely subordinated and subjugated by their male counterparts, indicating the patriarchal nature of the society. Secondly, the state system was had a centralizing tendency, means everything was centralized and the autonomy of an individual was always under attack. Why it was so? Because the empires are built usually by the compromises or the degree of autonomy we surrender to the central authority. Kings became despots. Why they become despots? Because of priestly class that made themselves intermediary between God and the king and the subject. These priestly classes were classifying king as only answerable to God, and they were legitimizing the rule of king, making them despots. King was not answerable to the subjects, and this made them even worse, or they became sort of dictators or oligarchs, more likely to be dictators or in contemporary times. So this was how the Vedic age was. Later Vedic period was completely taking shape, and we see Upanishads and Brahmanas during, or Vedantas being authored during this age. So the agriculture production was slightly increasing, so was the trade during this era, and the coinage system was gaining prominence slightly, but barter system was predominant. So with these are the points which you need to jot down in order to qualify for UPSC. You have to elaborate upon these points. So this was what about the administration in the Vedic age. With this, with the permission of the chair, I come to end of my presentation. So with the permission of the chair, may I declare this session over? So, with the permission of the chair and giving thanks to all the viewers, I am declaring this session over. Thank you.